So 2 ticks. All right, I think we're live there.
Yeah, it says, I can see, it says like you're live from what I can see
Okay,
here.
good. Oh yeah, perfect. Okay, because I'll have to monitor that chat as well. People will be in there asking questions. So there's about 5 devices going. Okay, guys. So welcome everyone to the Irish American Heritage Museum virtually, and our last event honouring and celebrating Black History Month. We're delighted tonight to have Femi Bankole, who is a founding member of an organisation in Dublin called Black and Irish. We last week did a lecture about the history of Black people in Ireland, which we said, was much more kind of longer term than we had previously thought. And of course, in the museum, we will have until the end of this weekend our exhibit on Daniel O'Connell and Frederick Douglass and their kind of interactions and influences on each other. So I suppose Femi and I were talking last month or 2 months ago when I was trying to organize this. And will you tell us why you said? Actually, I'm going to change the view too so that we see mostly only you. Um,
I'm not sure you want that now.
well, uh, and will you tell us, first of all, why did you set up Black and Irish, please?
Yeah, sure.
And welcome.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much, Elizabeth, for the opportunity to speak on the museum, to speak to everyone. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so hi everyone, good evening, or yeah, good evening, good morning for me, but good evening for all of you. Hope you're all doing well. Yeah, so we funded a organization in its current state called Black and Irish, and this was founded in June last year. And it was initially founded as an Instagram page, so just like a social media page. And the reason we started it was at the height of the George Floyd protests here in Ireland, which was well, I think it was June the 2nd, June the 1st, June the 2nd, in Ireland. And we went like peak pandemic to protest for the poor man who's lost his life in a very unsavory circumstances in America. And we thought it was right for us to protest in Ireland. And what had happened after that in terms of media backlash, the rhetoric from the general Irish public, which was here, what's going on? Why is I protesting? This isn't an Irish problem. What are you doing? Racism doesn't exist in Ireland. George Floyd is American. This is an American problem. And myself, my two mates, Bonnie and Leon, we sat down. We just usually just have a chat over once a week, and we sat down, and we were just very, very sad, worried, concerned about the rhetoric that was in the media about the protests. And it was like, we knew, I knew myself. I'd had loads of racial experiences in Ireland growing up. Leon knew he'd had that. Bonnie knew he had that. But we never really spoke to each other about this. It was just kind of a thing with Black people in Ireland. We know our experiences. We don't talk about it. And after this media backlash, as you can say, we thought, well, clearly the Irish public don't know about it. People in Ireland don't know about it if they think that this is just an American problem. And we thought we start a social media page, just an Instagram page, small Instagram page, where we would share stories of Black and mixed race people in Ireland on their experiences growing up in Ireland. And those experiences were at that point usually just geared towards racism. So we thought that, as you can see, storytelling is a creed that's as old as time itself, and in itself is probably very, very much immersed in Irish history, in our culture. And we thought, what better way than to reach out and to engage the Irish public than telling our stories of our experience in order to get people to empathize and see why this is not an American problem, and see that, yes, we were out protesting at the death of George Floyd, but for me as a Black man in Ireland, it meant so much more. It was significant in the sense of like, enough is enough. We've had these experiences. We've been victimized for years in this millennia, in the thousands, based off the color of our skin. We've been discriminated, and not just from other people, you know, by systems, by societal constructs. And that day was a very powerful day for us to go out and speak out. So that's why we started the platform. Now, the social media and the platform itself, grown exponentially. Like I'm telling you that this was June last year. You're taking a short 8-9 months. I'm telling you now, I've aged 10 years in that time. It has been a very long 8 to 9 months, and the platform has gained a lot of traction. It's turned into something massive. It could be a full-time job in itself. We have over 50,000 followers on Instagram. We have about 13,000 followers on Facebook. We've Twitter, we've got TikTok. It's grown from just, myself and the other two lads to by a team of about 20 of us. And it's grown into, this is an organization. We were very keen and determined when we set this up to be like, right, we're not just gonna be a fad. We're not just gonna be a social media platform who's just there for the trend. We're here to set our roots and embed ourselves properly into Irish society, because whether you like it or not, yes, I wasn't born in Ireland. I was born in Nigeria, and I spent 6 years in Nigeria before moving to Ireland. I'm 27 now. I lived in the UK for like 2 years, but I spent over 20 years of my life in Ireland. I've grew up, my formative years were in Ireland. I've been immersed and grown up in Irish culture. So you can't tell me that I'm not Irish. So what we're saying that in terms of our platform is like, we're here to stay. We're here as part of Irish culture, and we're here to, as we like to say it, help mainstream Blackness into Ireland. And that's very, very important for us. So sorry, Elizabeth, that's the only probably have many more questions.
Yeah, that's great. You're touching on all the other questions.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's perfect. So actually, would you mind telling us a little bit about your own backstory? And I'm not sure whether or not it's relevant, but this might lead you into talking about the difference between refugees and immigrants, so just tell us your own story first of all, and how you came to leave Nigeria.
Sure. Being very honest with you, my family were very well off in Nigeria. Nigeria is not necessarily like the safest place. Yeah. It's not necessarily the place where you get like the best quality of education. And we thought we'd move to Europe to get better education and give better opportunities for our kids. And that's something that anyone does.
Yeah, I immigrated to America.
Irish people do all the time.
Yeah.
So that was my background in terms of like, initially like when my parents moved to Ireland, and we weren't refugees, right? We were just migrants, just moving to a different place. So that was me moving to Ireland at 6 years old. So I grew up we landed in a small town, large town called Dundalk, just by the border. In the back arse of nowhere, as some might say.
Yeah.
Little coachia that I am. And growing up in Dundalk was an experience in itself. And the funny thing about growing up somewhere, especially as an outsider in inverted commas, is that you don't actually get to realize the experiences you had or realize the gravity of the experiences you had until in your older age. Like I'm now nearly 27, and I'm looking back my different experiences and the different encounters that I've had. I'm like, whoa, okay, maybe that wasn't great. Oh my God, that was such a fantastic experience. And I didn't really really fully immerse myself in that experience, if you get what I mean. And growing up in Dundalk was it was a fusion. So obviously I told you I was born in Nigeria, so obviously my parents are Nigerian, they're Yoruba, they're very proud Yoruba people. We're very proud of our culture, we're very proud of who we are. So I grew up in Africa in the sense as I grew up in an African home. My parents tried very much to immerse our culture upon us. But also at the same time, I grew up in Ireland, and I like to think of it this way. It's like I wake up in the morning, I'm Nigerian, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. when I went to school, I was Irish, and 3 p.m. to the rest of the day, coming back home, I was Nigerian again. And the funny thing about Nigerian and Irish culture is that they conflict in a lot of different ways. So you can already see how that's difficult growing up. It's like, for example, my parents like, here, listen, buddy, you've invested a lot of time, money, and sacrifice to come here. You need to knuckle down, you need to study, you're a Black man in a foreign country, you need to watch yourself, you need to be the best you can be. And we're just outside, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in Ireland, sure, it's grand. We just, we just go on ahead of it, like it's fine. The lackadaisical, fun, loving nature of the Irish. So that in itself already led to some, I don't want to say identity issues, but identity conflicts. And then you're then growing up, especially in secondary school, primary school, like I said, in Dundalk, where it's an area where there's just not many Black people. That's not necessarily anyone else's fault. I'm not saying that, but it does mean that you're prone to be on the receiving end of, kids can be mean. A kid wants to make fun of me. They see me that I'm different. They make fun of the color of my skin. Okay, they make fun of my pronounced features because I'm black. They make assumptions of my education and my culture and where I'm from based off, poor rhetoric that they see on TV and in the media. So things like that, especially in your formative years between 6 and 18 and 22, 23, that really affects your psyche. Being honest, I'd say that the racial discrimination and the teasing and the things that I was subject to based off the color of my skin, I can easily say that put me back easily 5 years in terms of my mental development. I had to go up to, I was like 18, 19, 20, 21. I'm having all these issues with confidence, identity, who am I? And it's not until, being honest with you, maybe over like last 2 or 3 years where I'm like really coming into myself and being a bit confident with myself, being okay, I'm comfortable in my own skin. And that in itself and you, listening to me hearing about, oh, that's just a normal part of growing up. Yes, imagine that being a normal part of growing up. But on top of that being the added sort of, issue of being black in a foreign country. So, I'm fine now. There's nothing to worry about there, but it's just something that, I was really aware of growing up. And that's something that younger black people in Ireland still experience till this day. And there's a plethora of issues or reasons why that could be. And whether it's, we're not being, exposed to a more diverse curriculum growing up. We're not being exposed to, a diverse media. We're not being represented in places. There's a phrase whereas, you can't be it if you don't see it. And that phrase rings very, very, very true for Black people. It's like, if we're only ever, represented or see us represented in poor manner on our screens in society, well, what is there for a Black person to attain to be? And I say that is that for a Black person to see themselves in a successful place, they need to be extraordinary. You in our current society as a Black person need to be in an extraordinary place, an extraordinary person to just get to a successful place. And those are the type of barriers, the microaggressions, the thoughts and different things that we're trying to influence with Black and Irish, and we're trying to instill. And where we are is at the at the start of a very, very long journey, and we're very aware of that. But it's by, even like doing things like this and speaking to you guys, that we can start to like change your mindsets. We're not deluded in terms of I'm not hoping to wake up tomorrow and all the plights of Black people or people of color or ethnic minorities around the world will be gone. But what we can do is start to plant the seeds, start to build the foundations to really, really make a better tomorrow for my kids. Like the way I see it is that I want to live in a world where in 5, 10 years, 15 years, when I have my kids, I don't have to have the conversation to him, be like, you're a Black man in this world, and there's certain things that you have to, certain things you have to put in place by virtue of being a Black man. And I think we're well on our way on that journey.
So, there's loads of bells dinging in my head. Of course, I'm an immigrant, to this country, and most of our audience have Irish ancestry, going back years. So I think all of us can identify with, as your parents did. I left Ireland. There was plenty of opportunity in Ireland. I wasn't hungry. It wasn't a famine. But so, that story is obviously universal. And then I think what, and I agree with you too, that, sometimes you're more Irish in your home. And I'm sure all these Irish Americans, that grew up with the symbolism of Irish, and even corned beef and cabbage, which isn't properly Irish, but, you cling to those symbols because it's all that you have amidst being an American, and so, and I find I have things in my house that there's no way I would have in the house had I stayed in Ireland, they're like, so, so that's an interesting aspect. And a couple of months ago, Femi, in the museum, we had an organization from Albany called the Refugee and Immigrant Services Center. And so that's why I kind of knew your parents were immigrants as opposed to, asylum seekers or something. But it's kind of sad to hear it's actually not that different an experience, coming in as an immigrant as opposed to an asylum seeker or a refugee. And I will say, that organization here in Albany, we're talking about the years that it takes, to get the paperwork to be out of your country, and you don't get to pick the country. So it's not like, there's lines of people saying, oh, I want to go to America. It's as simple as that. You know, it's very difficult to get out of the situation, to be approved by the UN Council, and then to get to any country, you know.
No one wants to be a refugee or an asylum seeker, I can assure you that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
But, you know, when you were speaking, you were touching off, you know, I wonder how the groups like Travellers in Ireland, last week we had a conversation with the mother and baby homes too, you know, like there's a lot of marginalized groups in Ireland where the mother and babies, you know, like their paperwork isn't kind of accurate. So sometimes it's difficult to get a passport, for instance, even though they're born in Ireland, but they don't have the long form, you know, birth certificate. So, you know, are you seeing that with your organization, which very clearly caters, you know, to one set of marginalized communities? You know, are you noticing that there's other organizations that kind of are suffering from the same isolation, I suppose, or you know, being pushed out of mainstream society?
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean. I think even if you take a step back, Ireland is actually quite a funny country. You know, we're very progressive in the sense that, you know, we're the first country in the world to legalize, you know, same-sex marriage by popular vote. We're very progressive in lots of different ways. And then there's also other ways where we're not as progressive. And in terms of, you know, other communities, that might have, like, you know, the same, I don't want to say plight, the same issues as the Black and Irish community. I'm not really sure if that's, like, you know, my place to say as such. You know, there is, you know, for example, you're talking about, you know, refugees and asylum seekers. You know, we obviously have, like, you know, direct provision in Ireland, which again is, like, you know, a method or a construct for asylum seekers who are probably kept in maybe not the best of circumstances in terms of seeking asylum in Ireland. Good news is that I think they passed the bill, or a bill is being passed for that to be disbanded as such.
Yeah.
But do you know what? As with any country in the Western world, unfortunately, there's different marginalized groups. They're minorities, as you say, for a reason. They're not necessarily maybe at the forefront of government policy. They're not at the forefront of society, and a lot of different groups do have different issues that marginalize them. In terms of issues that bring us together, yeah, of course, there's loads of different issues that bring us together. And again, what we're trying to do, Black and Irish, is on one hand, you know, it's like we're saying, like, you know, Black people are not a monolith. We're different. We all have different issues. We're all different personalities. You can't paint us all in the same brush. But on the other hand, we're like, okay, we're a kind of organization, that has a common experience, and obviously those two are probably like, you know, don't marry up if you're gonna start arguing with me, for example. But the only way you can actually drive change, the only way you can influence positions of power, people in power, the only way you can make and, you know, hope that, you know, correct policies directed at you is, you know, strength in numbers. Is showing the government and showing the policymakers and decision makers that, hey, this is a serious issue. This issue is affecting a large group. And again, saying that now, you know, Black African people represent, I don't know, like 2% of the Irish population. So not that I'm making excuses for the government, but I can see why that might not necessarily be at the very forefront of their agenda. But that doesn't, you know, we're in 2021. We've moved on very much as a society, and regardless of, you know, the percentage of the makeup of the population of an ethnicity, if there's systematic issues or societal issues or constructs that are affecting a minority or a group of people in a negative way, we need to do something about that. And it's very simple in my eyes in that sense, like, you know.
And so you know, I'm thinking back to my own childhood, like a small town in Kerry. We had actually, you know, various families that owned businesses and restaurants and things. From, you know, there was a Chinese family, an Indian family. We had Black people who were from Holland, you know, that were living there and are still there. German families, you know, and it was interesting because the German girl was Protestant, so didn't, even though we were in a state public school, like she didn't come to the mass things with us, you know, so she'd be like alone in the classroom, you know. So I guess, and I think from reading your Instagram and Twitter and stuff, a lot of the negative experience really do start in the schoolyard. Like kids are incredibly, as you said, mean and cruel. So are you going to focus on that with this campaign a little bit, to try to maybe, you know, start at the education level? And small classrooms especially, and then we'll get on to the larger societal issues.
Well, it's funny you actually bring that up in terms of the schools. We're actually at this point in time in the middle of conducting focus groups and writing like a report to the Department of Education and the SCCA to kind of like, hey, we need like, the curriculum to be more inclusive. Now, on the point that you made in terms of addressing things at secondary school level, so that's multi-pronged. So by three different prongs there. There's one, making sure we have a diverse curriculum enough that is one, not necessarily like growing up, the only thing I was ever taught about Black people or Black history in any sense of the word whatsoever was just slavery. So there I am, a Black kid, and the only way I see myself represented in education is the very, very negative, like negative connotations. So that's one thing. The second thing is actual like racial abuse. And racial abuse, again, itself comes with two prongs. There is the perpetrators, the kids probably don't know what the heck they're doing. And it's like, okay, how do we educate and address these issues from those kids? Okay. And then secondly, it's like the teachers. Some teachers, many times I went up to my teacher and being like, I've been called an N-word, I've been racially abused, or this and that has happened to me. And the poor teachers, like, they don't know what to do. They don't. They haven't a clue. They're as horrified and awkward and horrified situation as you are. So, again, it's like in their training, when they're coming through whatever teacher school, whatever you call it, are they being exposed to more diversity training? Are they being equipped with how to handle these situations? Do you know, are they given the tools? So there's multiple aspects of it. And like, I only even realized even further when I was having some conversations like two nights ago with some academics, and I was like, oh, we need to write a report. And she was like, what aspect do you want to focus the report on? And I was like, this aspect, and they're like, there's all these multiple aspects. I'm not necessarily an educator, hence why we try to engage educators to try and put this to the government. And I'm not making excuses for the government and stuff, but you see, it's not necessarily something that is clean cut. Now, it's not an excuse for there not to be any kind of structures or items in place, but there's a lot of different ways you can start off. You can just start off initially. For me, it's just like make it a more inclusive curriculum, and that's not just an inclusive curriculum just to Black people. There's major histories from people just like from where's like the East or like South America. Africa itself has a rich, very rich and vibrant
very
history.
diverse.
Very, very diverse.
It's a continent.
Yeah, exactly. And you're living, you're having schools now, you're having classrooms now where it's not just you're just one Black kid in the class or one, little Polish kids in the class, whatever. You're having more and more diverse classrooms. You're having more and more. I lived in Dublin. I've lived in Dublin now for the last like 6-7 years. Dublin is I've lived in London, I've lived in York, I've lived in Belfast, I've lived in like in a good few different cities. And Dublin is as multicultural and as diverse as cities come. A lot of different ethnicities and races are represented here. A lot of different ethnicities and races are coming here because Dublin's a great place to live. Ireland's a great place to live. And they're coming here to raise their families, to raise their kids, but their kids are not being exposed to things that represent them. So yes, I'm coming from it from a Black perspective because that's who we are and that's what we're representing, that's what we're fighting for. But in reality, like the entire thing needs to be chucked out the window and caught up with the times. We need to, on one hand, if there's a kid out there, dishing out racial abuse, it's not like, yeah, you get detention. I don't want that kid to get detention. I want that kid to be like, this is what you did. This is why it's wrong. To be educated. Maybe this is the historical context of this. Okay, you've done blackface. You didn't even realize you're doing blackface. I'm very offended and upset at it. Do you know what that means? Am I going to teach you by, the minstrels? Am I going to teach you by Jim Crow laws? Am I going to give you the historical context, arm you with information so you know the wrongs of your ways? And that's what we want. And that's what you could argue we want for society at this point. And again, we're talking to like white people, a lot of like my white friends and stuff, when I share my experiences, it's all like, I didn't know. And I think we're getting to it more and more to a place in society now where it's like, we're so readily armed with information and information is ready to us. Whereas, well, I didn't know maybe isn't necessarily good enough anymore. And that in itself comes the concept of being anti-racist. So it's not just, good enough to say like, hey, I'm not a racist anymore. It's like, I am actively anti-racist. That means like I am actively again, don't necessarily like using the phrase, but I'm actively, recognizing my privilege. I'm actively arming myself with information to make sure I can act correctly. I'm arming myself with information to make sure I am not making other people uncomfortable. In a sense, I just call it basic human decency,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because that to me is what it is.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's in one way the sad thing. Like, it is just treat people with the respect that you would wish them to treat you, But
Absolutely.
we had a meeting or a lecture last year by the Underground Railroad Museum here in Albany at our museum, and I was struck one of the things they're doing is kind of reinterpreting the language so that, like, as more and more people of color are able to be in a position to educate, rather than it coming from a white curriculum or whatever. So for instance, one of the things that they're doing, which I thought was very powerful, is they're not saying slaves, they're saying enslaved people, which kind
Yeah.
of puts the burden on the person who enslaved them,
Uh-huh.
instead. And they don't call them runaways. I forget what the word. And so it's this whole reimagining of the experience of the black person, and how much of that they had ownership of, and how much of that identity was inflicted kind of on them by a circumstance that they couldn't control. And I thought that was a very interesting kind of way of doing things. Femi,
Yeah.
though, the other thing is, I mean, I know from speaking to black organizations here, there is a massive sense of exhaustion in one way, like that, as you said, it's not good enough to say I didn't know anymore, or like, how can you not put yourself in somebody else's shoes for a mile and walk in them. And it sounds like, in a way, your organization is so new, the work is kind of only beginning in Ireland in one way. And so, do you have white allies? Are there, like, you shouldn't have to do the work for me, so how are you kind of tackling that aspect of it?
Yeah. Well, listen. I don't want to say black people are divided in this issue because, again, each person's individual.
Mm-hmm.
I can be like me, and I'm like, listen, Elizabeth, I don't want to be having this conversation. If you want to have this conversation, just go off to Google there. I don't want to be talking
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
And then you can have me on the other hand and be like, oh yeah, sure. Listen, do you want to learn about this? I have no problem talking
Okay.
to you about this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Us, myself and the lads, and the kind of ethics and principles that we are running our organization by, it's classic teach not preach, engage with people. We personally, from our perspective, what we're trying to do, we will never get tired. Yes, we're only in it 8 or 9 months. We haven't had a chance to get tired yet. Some
Yeah.
might argue.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But we will never get tired. That's our purpose here. That's what we want to do. we
Mm-hmm.
we want to work with different organizations, whether it's white or black. We like our motto is, we want to highlight the struggles and celebrate the successes of black people.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to do that in all areas of society in Ireland. And if that means that we need to work with white organizations, I don't know. There's not even any point in calling them white organizations.
Right.
We want to work with different organizations. We want
Mm-hmm.
to we want to collaborate with different brands in how to help them be more diverse.
Mm-hmm.
We've done loads of different talks with different companies, organizations, with the consulate, with loads of different places where it's like, hey, this is our story. And again, we're not necessarily doing anything novel. We're not here to, I don't have any qualifications on Black studies. I am here to educate you on my experience as a Black man in Ireland. And that's very key for us. I'm here to reach out to the human side of you, to empathize with you. That's like, hey, listen, Elizabeth, this is my experience over the last 15, 20 years. This is what I've seen. This is what has happened to me. This is how it has affected me. And some of those, Elizabeth, whether you like it or not, has been due to your actions.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Elizabeth, these are ways that you can act on that. These are ways you can improve on that. These are ways in which your actions can make my life a more pleasant place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we want to run with things. And
Mm-hmm.
we're doing that in loads and loads of new and creative ways, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's engaging people through social media, whether it's engaging people through the different campaigns we run on socials. Again, we're in COVID, so everything has to run virtually. We
Yeah.
got loads of big plans. As soon as COVID is over, we want to like
Mm-hmm.
really like, on one hand, we're like, yes, we're trying to fight racism. I'd wake up one morning, I'm like, screw racism, I don't care. Racism does not define me. It doesn't define me as a black person. Like it doesn't, Elizabeth. I'm being
Mm-hmm.
very honest with you. I
Mm-hmm.
am I am so much more than being defined by discriminated practice based off the color of my skin.
Mm-hmm.
I want us to come together as a black community and really like engulf and celebrate our culture and celebrate our heritage, celebrate our Irish heritage, and celebrate our African or Afro-Caribbean heritage. That's what I want to be in it. That's what I want. I want to create a space for Black people in Ireland to feel comfortable and accepted in. And as long as we're doing that, we're happy. And when I sent, so it's like our goals have like two concurrent goals where it's like, yes, we want to, like I said, highlight the struggles, but we also want to celebrate our successes. We also want to, create a community for us. Not necessarily like be like, if Ireland doesn't accept us, we'll create a space. Not like that, but both things can work hand in hand. We can create a community and a place for us all to come together and celebrate and help each other, adapt as such. But we also want to work hand to hand with Irish community. We want to educate people. We want to make Ireland a more inclusive place. And we want to put structures and foundations in place for that. We want to engage the right people. We want to speak to the right people. And that's very important for us.
Great. Would you tell us some of the success stories and that you do highlight on either Instagram or your TikToks?
Yeah, sorry, you caught me a bit off guard there.
Pivot to the positive side.
Yeah, so like we run like loads of different campaigns. So we run, for example, like a music week where we'll like, right, for a week we're finding every as many Black and Irish artists as we can in Ireland. Ones that are doing well with themselves, ones that are, doing really well, ones that are not doing not so well. And we're gonna stick them all on their page. We're gonna put pictures of them up, we're gonna put bits of like their music videos up, and we're gonna like put that out there to our 50,000 followers for a week. And that's it. We're gonna have like Irish History Week, where like Black Irish History Week, we're like, hey, we've done all the research for you. You don't need to worry about that. We've gone back hundreds of years, see all the stuff that wasn't taught to you in the history books in school, see all the stuff that you didn't know about. I'm learning in this. Here's a load of Black Irish history relevant to you right there, done to you on your screen. We're having Education Week. We're like, here's Black people cannot just be sports stars and musicians. Here's a load of really educated Black people who are getting fantastic scores in their Leaving Cert, who are doing really well in education, who got PhDs, all these fantastic, educated, high achieving Black people. Do you know what? Here they are, all in one place for a week. Read their stories, read their successes. And in that sense, I wish I had stuff like that growing up. I wish I didn't have to be like, oh yeah, what do I have to aspire to? So we're trying to do that for the young generation. And we're also trying to do that for like the Irish people who might have maybe some, poor and predisposed, opinions of Black people, being like, oh, you're just here to, mooch off our government, or you're just here to, they're not working, they're not educated, they're bums. Actually, listen, this is us. This is here. We're in Ireland. We're actively contributing positively to Irish society. And here's evidence of that. And you might be there like, do you know what? I actually didn't know that. That's fantastic. Fair play to them. Do you know? So it has two facets for it in that sense, like,
Yeah. You kind of answered this a little bit, I think, earlier on, but I was going to ask you, did you find a difference between rural Ireland and the city, like particularly Dublin, as you say, Google are there and all of these international companies. So they're, aside even from, Irish people of color, there are workers coming in from other countries, who may not find the city very welcoming, or do, find the city welcoming. So have you noticed a difference between, it must be difficult in a way, like in a small town, to be the only one, kind of.
Yeah. Well, did you know what? Right? It's a bit weird, right? So Dundalk is actually quite a large town. I'm pretty sure growing up, I don't know what it is now. Growing up, Dundalk was like the largest town population-wise in Ireland. So it's like this, right? It's like, so my mom moved to Dundalk because she heard her friend who moved to Dundalk. She's like, oh, cool, my friend's in Dundalk. Then she told her friends, and she told her friends and her friends, and it ended up being like quite a large population of like Black people in Dundalk. So like I remember like going to like I've been in secondary school, so I'm in sixth year, so everyone's like 100 people, 120 people like in our year, but there'd be like 20 Black people there. Like, so like I wasn't necessarily like, we had like a nice, in Dundalk, definitely. We actually had like quite a nice community feel and a nice community of Black people. So I never necessarily felt like isolated in my in that sense. But coming to Dublin, I maybe argue that like it's like I felt more isolated, as in the sense that Dublin is such a large city. Yes, it's more diverse and multicultural, and there's more Black people here, but there's necessarily, for me personally, maybe like less of a community feel. Like all my friends, maybe like not everyone's living in Dublin. People are dispersed around the place. It's a city. Everything is fast paced. Everything's fast moving. Like there's not necessarily that sense of community feeling to it as such. But yeah, like in terms of the experience of growing up like in a more rural place, yeah, it's very different. Like realistically, Dundalk again is weird in that sense. Is that so? My parents like up and left Dundalk. She's like maybe like 7 or 8 years ago now. It's quite a long time ago. And if you went back to Dundalk now, the town is just empty. Everyone's gone. Everyone's up the left. So it's not necessarily there wouldn't be much of a black population in Dundalk anymore as such. People just moved on. They've had their kids. We're all old now. So the parents are like, yeah, we've done our job. See you later. On to the big time, like,
to Nigeria, or are they still in
No, no, a lot of the parents have actually moved to London. I suppose this is probably like another necessary like issue for like the older generation of Black people in Ireland. And I probably didn't maybe necessarily like understand this until I got like, a bit closer to my parents' age. Like so I'm very close to my parents' age now when they had me and moved to Ireland. So this is like early 2000s, and I'm still so baffled and shocked by the entire thing. So here you have like a woman in her early 20s and her husband moving to a new country, other side of the world. This is 2000. You barely got emails. You don't have you've dial-up internet. You don't have FaceTime. You've left your friends, your family, you've left everything. They didn't fly back to Nigeria for like 5, 6 years after that. And I was like, you're in a new country. Your qualifications that you have from Nigeria are not necessarily, they don't get recognized. Any qualification, you can have a PhD from Nigeria and bring it to Ireland. It's not getting recognized. And I think African migrants, like the first generation, like our parents, probably struggled a lot in terms of like the struggling with settling down in Ireland. I can just only imagine the amount of racial encounters that my parents would have had. She told me some of it and she just refused. She's like, you don't need to hear about it. I can only imagine the trauma that they faced, and just to also like raise us up here. And I think for them, after a while, they're like, we don't necessarily like we're here to like have a better life for our kids, and they've settled down, they've grown up, they've assimilated the Irish culture, they're doing their own thing now, and they're like, right, see you later, we're off to London. London obviously has like a lot more of a African community, and London's much more established than Ireland in that sense. You got African restaurants everywhere, you got you have Nigerian, do you know that kind of thing? So there's like
come home for your parents, really.
Yeah, it's become home for my parents. Yeah. I was actually chatting to my mom jokingly there like a month ago, being like, here, listen, like, the COVID restrictions in England aren't looking great. You guys aren't looking great restrictions. Would you move back to Ireland? And she was like, never. And I was like, Jesus Christ, what's going on?
But that's kind of sad, and I mean, I think you raise a very important point in terms of advocacy and stuff, because that has come up before, that your degrees aren't recognized, or I mean, there has to be a system of analyzing that, and for sure people travel with Irish people do it, with fake papers or with a forged degree, but like there is a way to check that and to evaluate it, and we should make those kinds of paperwork issues more easy for people to navigate.
Yeah, it's really sad actually. There was a campaign, one of the campaigns we're thinking of running in the near future. It's like you hear about so many like black taxi drivers or black people in very like
and they're
poor jobs, and they have PhDs. I'm just like, this is crazy. How can you spend 4, 5, 6 years in a PhD?
And what a waste for Ireland, like the talent going untapped.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In so many sense, like, I understand, maybe recognizing specific degrees in terms of like fields like medicine or whatever, where obviously like, that makes sense kind of thing. Like medical practices are different in Africa than they would be in Ireland, etc., etc. But there's just certain fields like, we're teachers, for example, like there's Nigerians are very studious people, or Africans are very studious people. They're very good educators. Education is a very big part of our culture. And you have loads of capable teachers come to Ireland. And it's like, sorry, you got to go back to college, do it in Ireland. Yeah, exactly. So that's lots of work to do.
Lots of work to do, I know, yeah. So we've had a couple of questions on Facebook, and I see on here too. one question, and this might be difficult for you to answer. Obviously, like we're up to our neck in it here, to be honest. I mean, you know, the whole race relations and obviously Black Lives Matter started here. Do you think racism or the treatment of people of color is different in Ireland and America, or like is it kind of a continuum?
No, it's very different. Again, I can only go off what America's experience is based off what I see on TV or I see in the media. I'm not a Black American. I haven't lived in America. I haven't lived the American experience, but I do know there's loads of differences in the American experiences in Ireland. You know, one, we don't necessarily have like, you know, a poor relationship with the Gardaí, like the
Yeah, that was the other question. I'm just going to ask you that too.
Yeah, so I keep answering your questions without you ask.
Yeah. Do the Gardaí discriminate more or kind of obviously against Black Irish people at home?
Again, that's a very difficult question to answer. It's like, is there discrimination
at home?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, we've had that case very recent, literally it's 7 weeks, hasn't even been 2 months. And sorry, but if you're on the spot here, it's a very difficult question to answer because yes, of course, there's, you know, racial profiling or discrimination as such in the Gardaí as they would in any organization. I know loads of Black people who've had very, very poor relationships with the Gardaí. Well, it's not necessarily to the extent as it is in America, and I wouldn't want to do a disservice to what Black people are experiencing in America by comparing it to what's going on in Ireland. I think in terms of the general racial experience in Ireland versus what goes on in America, I don't think it's necessarily as, you know, ingrained, institutionalized in that sense, you know. I think in Ireland, I think what we struggle the most with is like, oh, you know, we're Irish, we've been marginalized, you know, we've suffered from colonialism, we've been whatever, enslaved, indentured servants to the English monarch. We can't be racist. We've had our own plight. And that mindset is extremely dangerous because you're exhibiting racial behaviors, you're perpetuating microaggressions, you're making people's life uncomfortable to live, you are adding to societal constructs and government constructs that are all in all, you know, racist. And with that mindset, it's like, what? How can I even explain to you that it's racist, or how the effect it has on me when you're not willing to listen? Because like, well,
we were victims too.
We were victims too. You know, where I think America has a much larger history in that sense. It's a totally different type of race.
It is, yeah, and
totally different.
Excuses for Irish people, but I think, you know, the society is kind of clannish. It's very insular looking. You know, I don't think this is necessarily just affecting people of color. Like you kind of mentioned Polish people earlier on. Like I remember when I was growing up, it was, you know, the Romanians kind of thing. And so, you know, like there are marginalized groups, which again is not to take from any one particular story. So Sean at the consulate had asked, you said that you can't be it if you can't see it. Do you think young people in Ireland look to the US for role models, or is that changing? And you were doing so much outreach in the US. Are you being contacted by Americans of both Irish and African descent, or by Black and Irish people who have moved to the US? So two.
Yeah, okay. No problem. Thanks, Sean. Two great questions.
Easy ones.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. Yeah. What is it? Do you think young Black people in Ireland look to the US for young models, or is it changing? I'd actually think we look more closely to the UK for like our role models and our like intake from culture. You'd have the younger generation, Black generation, is going to go crazy. Like between like 15 to like 22, they take all their culture, their lingo from London and England. And again, it's kind of like the same thing. Like when I'm saying like from like my parents and like the older generation, they're like moving to the UK because like, oh yeah, it's normal and okay to be Black over here. Same thing in terms of like, you know, seeing representation in media, seeing representation in music, the different things that they interact with, the things that, you know, it's a fusion of African and English culture. It's like, oh yes, I've seen this growing up in an African home. And I've also seen this in Western society. And this belongs in London. Now, saying that, there's a fantastic new, like, I have no clue what it is, but fantastic new kind of, trends and kind of like Black Irish that is emerging for the younger, whereas like, you know what, screw it. We don't want London anymore. We're trying to create our own trends. We're trying to create our own scene, the Black and Irish scene, the Black and Irish music. I don't know much about it, so don't ask me any questions about it, but I just know it exists up there in the background. And
I
as
think that they go.
sorry,
I mean, it's not surprising, I suppose, but but there is probably because of the colonial influence. So, like, a lot of African countries were obviously British colonies, so there is that
yeah,
kind of symbiosis of the. But it's funny, like we're dying to shake off any identity of England, and yet I can see how people of color might kind of cling to it because, as you say, it's more familiar to them than maybe an Irish identity.
yeah. I'll just answer his second question.
Yeah.
There's so much outreach in the US. Are you being contacted by American, both Irish and African descent? Listen, Sean, we are not intentionally doing loads of outreach in the US. I think to be honest, there's no trend or whatever. It's just all a little chaos. I think we've done one or two things in America, which has just led to other opportunities and other people like reaching out to us. I think something that we're very actually conscious of, not necessarily conscious of, but we've recently become more aware of. It's just like, oh my God, like Ireland, Irish people, there's literally about 80 million of us in the diaspora. We're all over the world. We're everywhere. So you can just imagine the amount of potential like Black and Irish people, whether it's in Australia, in Asia, in South America, in America, and we're there being like, we're Black and Irish, and we haven't even thought about these people. So that's a further project down the line. But it's also people whose experiences are very valid, and they're probably very different from us. They'll probably be like, we're very cool and in tune with our Black selves, but we're not really maybe necessarily in tune with our Irish selves. We don't necessarily know what Irish culture is. We want to embrace that. I want to find my Irish roots. I like, there's so much more there that is left to be uncovered. That is really fascinating, and I'm excited to find the time to explore that a bit more.
Yeah, good. So Megan has asked, and maybe you won't be able to answer this because it's kind of an American, I think, issue rather than an Irish issue, but there is a phrase over here, Black Irish, which has nothing to do with people who are Black. It was more a term, like they incorrectly traced it to the Spanish Armada and the people had settled in. But she's saying, are you called Black and Irish to differentiate from that term, or was it because you were both at the same time, both identities at the same time?
Yeah, thanks for that, Megan. Yeah, as Elizabeth said, obviously the Black Irish are, people with sallow skin, black hair, descendants of people from Spain who come to Ireland. So yes, we have nothing to do with that whatsoever. It was just coincidence. And yes, the Black and Irish, I don't think we were like, oh, there's Black Irish, so we need to put Black and Irish. I think we were just very intentionally is like, we are Black and we are Irish. Those are two separate things that in certain people's heads cannot exist. But then, well, here I am
Mm-hmm.
Black and I'm Irish, and there should be like a full stop at the end of that as well. Just to emphasize it. Yeah, exactly.
And Megan's other question was, are there discriminatory systemic laws in Ireland like the Jim Crow laws here in the US? Jim Crow laws.
Yeah. So no is the short answer to that. There isn't. I don't know what to say. There isn't.
It is I'm getting messages from all over on Facebook and everything from people who are Irish that said they never grew up consciously being aware of, like a sense that Black people were inferior, or, so they're all, messaging to say this. And that is true. Like I never, I do remember the first time I saw a Black person, I was about 9, and he had a beautiful, huge afro. And like, I come from a tiny town, 1,500, 3,000 people with the hinterland. And I was saying, like, look, Dad, and Dad was like, don't point, But I was just saying, like, look at how fabulous the hair is, kind of thing. But I remember it stood out because, like, my father didn't want me drawing attention or kind of shouting, and I'm sure I wasn't roaring, But so that's, you grow up with maybe no experience or no exposure to people outside of your own culture in rural Ireland. So I definitely, and everyone that's emailing in didn't think that they were racist. But then, of course, when you're exposed to it, maybe there are underlying prejudice or just, bad manners that you don't know how to respond to something, Mhm.
And that's what I was saying when I was trying to say that, Irish racism and US racism are very different, very distinct. And it's not necessarily like, oh, there I am, I hate black people, or black people are inferior to me. It's very, very, very different from that,
Yeah. And then we had a question on Facebook. Do you keep up with your Nigerian culture, or are you more Irish or European or British in outlook? Some children of immigrants react differently. Some wish to preserve culture, others to assimilate. So how do you fit in?
I am a perfect mixture of both.
Yeah.
Realistically, oh, it's like 1 second you hear me now, and this is me in my default state, speaking in my hybrid Irish accent, which is Dundalk and Dublin and a bit of Belfast all in one. And then I'll pick up the phone to my mom and she'll call me, and she obviously just still speaks in an African accent, and I'll be replying to her in an African accent because I can't help it.
So Nigerian food.
It doesn't matter to me.
Oh, you like it? Okay.
I don't want to say it's like 50-50 because I can't decipher that. I don't know. I'm just like literally
for you, like what your mom would make, or a child.
I eat both. I love a good chipper as much as the next person. I love my battered sausage. I love my coddle. I eat everything. I eat all Irish meals. And my girlfriend is Irish. And then I eat all my African food, and I just it's the proper full-on fusion. There's no differentiation. There's no, oh, I prefer this part of me more, I prefer this part of me more. Again, it's like I am black and Irish, full stop. That's me. And I actually I wouldn't like to separate different parts of my identity. I wouldn't like to separate different parts of my heritage. Look at it this way. I grew up very much around Nigerian culture. I grew up very much around Irish culture. I like to think that I've taken the best from both cultures and fused it to make me the person I am today. And it's like, that's the end of it,
Well, I think Ireland are delighted to have you and very lucky, Femi. Does anybody else have any questions? I'm checking all three screens that I have going, but
fair play to you.
Go back on Facebook, even though there are more comments, but I can't go back. Anyone here on Zoom that has a question?
Can I just talk instead of typing
sure.
it out?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for coming.
No problem.
I followed you guys on Instagram like months ago, and I was excited when I saw that you were coming to talk on Zoom. But I have another question. I don't know if you personally or you have come to the US, but have you ever encountered people that are in shock that you are Irish just from when you open your mouth and talk? And are they like surprised to hear you have an accent? If that makes sense.
Yeah. I've actually been to US a couple of times. I've been to like San Francisco and Atlanta. I was actually in San Fran at the start of the pandemic this time last year, and I had to run all the way home for the borders were closed. But yeah, no. Sorry.
Lucky you got back.
Yeah, exactly. To answer your question, I get it all the time. Being honest, being black and Irish is not necessarily like a common thing. If someone is like, oh my God, you have an Irish accent and you're black, as long as it's not in like, necessarily like a condescending way or a way to be like, what are you talking about? How do you have that accent? Like, I don't mind. I get it all the time. It's not, I'm not want to say a normal thing. It's not something you see very often. Saying that now, you come back to Ireland, there's a lot of black people who grew up here with Irish accents who are Irish, who've probably never been to Nigeria, never been to Africa, and they'd have full on Irish accents. And it's not, if you're in Ireland, it's not necessarily like a surprising thing. But yeah, if I'm abroad, I don't know, where was I last? If I was in Thailand and I'm walking into an Irish bar, because there's an Irish bar in every country that you go to in the world. And I was like, gives a pint of Guinness there. And they're like, oh my God, where are you from? And it's like, I was like, oh yeah, Dublin. It's like, oh my God, I'm from this part of Dublin or whatever. Like, the usual, the same thing you get as an Irish person, whatever you're at, anywhere else abroad, like, which is a fantastic and a great feeling, like,
Yeah. Well, I do hope the Ireland of the welcomes, continues to work on their welcome and include everybody, that's important. Jack, did I see your hand go up there, or were you just scratching? Does anyone else have any questions? Bob, thanks you, Femi. He says it was great to hear your story and thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, I don't think we have any other questions. And so we were delighted to have Sean from the consulate on tonight. I forget, on Wednesday we're having Dr. Margaret Lash-Carroll giving a talk about Governor Glynn here in Albany and his involvement with the Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921 into 22. And March is jam-packed with events. I'll be doing the newsletter in the next couple of days, so you'll see those. But I think our first event is maybe the 3rd or 4th of March. It's a talk about the Irish servant girl. Jean says, thank you for your insights. You're doing great work. So yes, Femi, I think that's exactly the point. You know, the biggest takeaway that and how can we support your mission? Nice.
Okay. Oh, so do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, I do.
Sorry. I didn't know that was a question. Oh, sorry. Thank you so much, Jean. Thanks, everyone. I've really enjoyed coming on here and chatting to you guys. How can you support our mission? Jump on social media, like our page. We have a website, blackandirish.com. We sell merchandise, all right, like for Black or white people celebrating like our Irish identity. There's loads more things we're doing. So if you follow our pages, whether you're on Facebook, again, Black and Irish, Instagram, Black_and_Irish, blackandirish.com. There's loads and loads of different things that we're doing. It will be on the website, be on the social medias, engage with our content, read the people's stories on our page and on our website, educate yourself on our experiences. You know, if you're thinking like, you know, I'm Irish and I've lived in Ireland and I don't agree with, you know, personally how Femi's painted Ireland, maybe please, maybe I haven't articulated it very well. So please maybe go onto our page and read our stories and see people's experiences, and maybe that can help you understand.
Yeah, I love reading the stories and seeing, you know, what people are doing. So thank you so much. I know it's very, very late there. If nobody else has any questions. I appreciate this so much, and we'll definitely have you back. Particularly, I think, you know, as you get involved with these other projects, and maybe when COVID is all over too, because I think the work will change. But allowing us, you know, to have a little glimpse into what for the Irish people is being on the other side. You know, we're so used to exporting our people out that it's interesting to see how we deal with people coming in. And, you know, as I said, that I grew up in what I always thought was a welcoming Ireland and that we were a curious people. And so you would hope to see that reflected instead of an intolerance and a narrow-mindedness. So I hope we can all foster compassion for each other and keep going. And, you know, we've a lot of work to do in both countries. But thank you, Femi, and stay well, everyone. I'll see you guys on Wednesday, I hope. And look up Black and Irish, of course, and our own museum page. And thank you, Sean, for tuning in. I appreciate that support from the consulate.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your
Get some sleep.
I'll try.
Good. Thanks, guys. Take care. Everyone is thank you.
Thanks.
Good night. Bye. Okay, take care. There will, Janet, be a replay on Facebook. I'm just answering some of the questions. So there will be a replay available on Facebook. Okay, thank you all. Good night. Thank you, Femi. I really appreciate it.
Okay, no problem.
You can share it if you like from our Facebook page to yours.
We'll have a look at that later on. Grant. Okay. So listen, I'll chat to you later. Drop me an email later on, all right?
I will. Thank you so much. Take care.
Have a good one.
You too. Good night. Bye-bye.